Welcome to Volunteer Friendly, episode 4, Planning versus Spontaneity. My name is Will Doggett. Thanks so much for joining me. The Volunteer Friendly show is all about questions, thoughts that we can contemplate on our own, discuss with our team, that will make us go, is this something we should start doing, stop doing? Why did we do this in the first place? And if you're a worship leader, production person involved in making a Sunday service happen, then this show is for you. Now, the past few episodes, I felt the heat, even personally. For me, as I'm talking about them, I'm going, do your best, Will, to not express your personal opinion, because this show is not about a platform for me to share my own personal ministry philosophy, but it's all about providing a thought-provoking question or thing to get you contemplating it on your own and discussing with your team. But the past few episodes have been pretty, it's heated up, right? And so today's episode, I think, is going to continue in that vein, but maybe not as heated. But as I always say, at the end of this, I'll provide some processing questions for you. And if you want those in PDF form, then you can go to volunteerfriendly.com, search for episode 4, because this is episode 4, and you can find those questions, processing questions, as a PDF to help you contemplate and help you discuss with your team. And the other thing, I don't think I've done a great job of mentioning this in previous episodes so far, but you can head to Volunteer Friendly, and on each one of those individual episode pages, you can comment publicly. You don't have to be a From Studio to Stage subscriber to do that, but you can comment publicly and have a discussion publicly about what you feel and how you feel about that. As I often say at the end of the show, or try to remember to say at the end of the show, I'm not after you presenting your opinion as gospel truth, but you just saying, here's what this stirred up in me. Here's what I'm thinking about that. So now let's get to it. Today, we're talking about planning versus spontaneity. Now, I sit kind of in the middle of this, and that comes from both my experiences being a worship leader, being out front, being a musician who values improvisation over playing the chart from top to bottom, and also being a production person who has programmed lights, who has created lyrics in ProPresenter, who has synced shows together using Ableton, and been in situations where I value planning and preparation and working with people who value spontaneity. So what I want to do in this particular episode is I want to just kind of talk through that planning versus spontaneity. What's more important to you? Are you in a situation? And what I love, what I'm so grateful and thankful to God for is I've had experiences in churches that are small, churches that are big, churches that highly value spontaneity and following what they feel is the Spirit prompting them to do a particular song, to repeat a particular part of a song. But I've also worked with and in churches that planning is trumps spontaneity. Preparation and having a plan and sticking to that plan trumps spontaneity, and they feel as if that honors God, above spontaneously going somewhere. I've been in places where they have felt that worship that is spontaneous is more authentic than worship that is planned. And listening to this, you hear me say that, or watching this, if you're watching on YouTube or from Studio Stage TV, you may be going, Will, I'm in that camp. Worship that's an acoustic guitar that's completely spontaneous is way more authentic, way more honoring to God than pre-planned worship that's synced and automated and using Ableton to control lights and lyrics and video and all those sorts of things. You may be in a situation where you hear that and you go, yeah, but Will, spontaneity is for people that are just crazy. They're just like, hey, whatever I want to do, I'm going to do there. Maybe they're lazy. They haven't prepared. And so in that moment, they're choosing spontaneity over remembering what the lyric is because they forgot what it is, right? And I'm not saying either of those things are true, and I'm not saying either of those things are wrong. I'm just presenting them as experiences I've had. I'm presenting them as conversations I've had. And again, I've worked in churches where, again, spontaneity is a super high value, and I've worked in churches where planning and preparation is a super high value. I think for most of us, whether you see this now or whether you believe this now, I think for most of us, we probably feel like both of these are super important, right? I don't know a lot of people that just step on stage on Sunday morning without a song list, without some sort of preparation, and just wing it, right? And just go for it. Because the reality is most of us step on stage, even as a solo worship leader, we're still interfacing with other people. We're interfacing with a ProPresenter person. We're interfacing with a lighting person, maybe. We're interfacing with a pastor that has a message, that has a theme. And so most of us can't just get up and just kind of go rogue and do whatever we want to. And again, I'm not trying to present that as right or wrong. So if you're watching this, listening to this, and that's what you do, again, I'm not trying to say you're wrong in that. I'm just saying most of us are not in that situation. But What I've seen more often than not is this general tendency, and I wrote this down to make sure I communicated this because, again, I have experience. You can see right over there. There's my degree from Liberty University, or my diploma, I guess what you call it, for worship and music ministry degree. And I spent 5 years of my life, if not more, definitely more before college, but about 5 after, leading worship, being the person out front with an acoustic guitar. And again, as I mentioned, as a just musician, just guitar player, I highly value improvisation over playing, the song as written. And I think in my experience, and I'd be interested to know if you feel the same way, and you can go to volunteerfriendly.com, comment on, again, episode 4, that's what we're on, comment on the post there. But I tend to think worship leaders, musicians tend to value spontaneity over planning. Now, that's not everyone. That doesn't mean you don't plan. I have just found in my experience, both as a worship leader, both as working with worship leaders, that it tends to be that worship leaders value spontaneity as a super high thing. Now, again, it depends on your denomination. It depends on what church you're a part of, what movement you're a part of, where spontaneity may be super valuable, and then some where it's not super valuable, or it may not even be allowed. I've been in churches where it's like, this is the plan, stick to it. Anything other than that, we excommunicate. It's not that far, but you know what I mean? But it tends to be worship leaders highly value spontaneity. And here's the reverse side of this, because I'm also, now I'm a production person. I do broadcast director at my church here in Austin, was a creative director in Florida, tech director in Florida, led the production track at Ocean's Edge School of Worship. I've done a lot of production. I've done a lot of leading and music as worship. Well, that's a whole nother subject we'll come to in a later episode. But production and tech folks tend to value planning. And I actually wrote, and I should mark this out because that shows my opinion. I said they tend to overvalue planning and preparation, because here's what I've seen. And this is why I want to present this. And this is why the show is not worship and tech, and it's not worship leaders and production people, and it's not just for production people, and it's not just for worship people, because we have to work together, right? There's no scenario where we walk into church and we just, as a worship leader, do our thing and it has no impact on production. And there's no scenario where production team walks in and drives the whole experience and it has no impact on people that are on stage leading worship, looking towards the congregation, right? I believe it was Carlos Whitaker that used to always say that the worship leader leads looking towards the congregation, the lead from the stage out, and the production person leads worship from, the back of the room towards the stage, right? That's kind of how they're leading worship. Both are leading worship. Again, another topic for another day. But I tend to see, again, that worship leaders tend to value spontaneity. Production people tend to value planning and preparation. And I've seen the corruption of those. I've seen to where worship leaders value spontaneity so much that it breaks down their relationship with production. And I've seen where production values, and I would say even overvalues, planning and preparation so much that it disrupts their relationship with worship leaders. I don't want to provide a solution here. I want to keep living in that tension and provide us, as we wrap up here, 3 processing questions that you can, one, contemplate on your own and discuss with your team. Again, if you want a PDF download of these, go to volunteerfriendly.com, search for episode 4, and you can find these and download for you to contemplate on your own and discuss with your team. So here we go. Number 1, is worship that is spontaneous more honoring to God than worship that is planned? And I know the term worship is ambiguous. We'll dig into that maybe in a later episode, but I'm talking particularly about a worship service, the thing that happens on Sunday or Wednesday or Saturday. Corporate worship service is worship in that sense that is spontaneous, more honoring, more authentic, if you want to throw that in, to God than worship that is planned. Okay. Number 2, does planning worship and sticking to the plan quench the spirit? Number 2, does planning worship, again, talking about worship service, corporate worship service, does planning a corporate worship service and sticking to the plan quench the spirit? That's going to be a touchy one for some churches, some people. Number 3, are we pursuing, here's one that's going to ring home for a lot of folks we're going to have to deal with. Are we pursuing planning or spontaneity more out of comfort or conviction? Are we valuing and pursuing and preaching planning, or preaching, valuing spontaneity more out of our own comfort than we are conviction. So if you want those 3 questions, again, head to volunteerfriendly.com, search for episode 4. You can download that PDF to share amongst you and your team. You can share it freely once you get it. And if you want to, then head to Volunteer Friendly, search for episode 4 to join in the conversation and chat in the comments. Thanks for joining me this week for this week's episode. I hope you enjoy living in that tension, working through this together, because I'm doing the same thing, and it's fun and it's challenging. But I'll see you next week. Have a great week. We'll see you next week, Thursday at 10 a.m. Central. Take care, everybody. Bye.